I know you'd said in another video that when you were teaching at UCLA that each, and forgive me if you're on the semester system or the quarter system, but okay, each quarter or semester you would see maybe two people in the
Right.
class that you really felt were like
Right.
the gem and the gems, and the other ones, although with time and with proper training they could become that. I'm wondering, first of all, those two people, that's hypothetical, would they really know? Could they see that they were different from the other writers?
Usually.
And, really? Okay. How would they know, and what would they, how could they see it, and how could you see it?
So I was talking about this with a manager the other day, and I'm afraid I'm going to over-answer your question, so I apologize ahead of time. So one of the key skill sets, in addition to creative integration, is to build the right and compelling conflict. And compelling conflict is what takes great characters and great dialogue and just makes it pop off the page. It's hard to explain, but you have a visceral experience when you read. You read some stuff, it's just bad. And then you read some stuff and it's got some great moments and some great characters or dialogue, but it's nothing really happening. Then you read some stuff and it's good, things are happening and it's interesting. But then you read something and it just pops off the page. You can tell. I was a studio reader, and I could tell within one page if someone knew what they were doing, if it popped off the page or not. Now, if that one page was great, I don't know if they could write a whole script. I have to keep reading. But if that one page didn't pop, I knew they couldn't. And yeah, if I had a class of about 20 people, there'd usually about 2 people, and their writing just sort of popped off the page more than others. They didn't know why necessarily, but everyone could tell, and I think they could tell. They would often not say anything. It's like in a writing group, there's usually one person whose writing just is better than everyone else's, or in an MFA program. It just, maybe people don't know why, but it does. What I've learned is it's because they're writing in compelling conflict. And I find that about 5% of the writers that come to work with me naturally do that. I don't have to teach them. It just has that popping off the page. And about 5% sort of do that. And the other 90% are anywhere from they need some work to they suck at it. They just suck at it. But you can teach people how to do it. So a great example is Neil Simon, the playwright. He has a book called Rewrites, which is his autobiography. And he talks about, like, year after year when he was a younger man, he'd write these plays and he loved the characters, and everyone thought they were hysterically funny, but there was just something missing. It just didn't hold together. It just wasn't interesting enough. And over time, he's like, I know something's missing, but I don't know what it is. And I know a lot of writers who feel that way, and it's a really terrible feeling. He eventually did the one thing he never wanted to do, is he went to his older brother, who was a really successful writer. And his older brother read his stuff and said, you're not writing in compelling conflict. And Neil Simon's like, what are you talking about? What is this? And he said, my older brother taught me what it was. And then the light bulb went off. And so then he said, I would just structure my compelling conflicts and then pour in all the character and comedy. And that's how he did his career. David Mamet, and this is on my website or you can look online, he did a memo about a decade ago or so to the writers of The Unit, his TV show. And he basically said, you will learn how to write in compelling conflict or you'll be in the blanking unemployment line or the bread line. And there was a lot of F-bombs in this memo, but he was basically saying, this is not a natural skill set for most people. You will learn to do this or you will not survive. And so I didn't know it at the time. And to go back to your question, actually for the truth of my experience was the 18 people whose stuff wasn't popping off the page, I wasn't able to get them there. And so I, like a lot of teachers, and I talk to teachers at UCLA and other film schools, and they'll say this privately, I don't know, they'll say this publicly. It's like, yeah, when you teach a class, you're teaching for that 1 or 2 person or people who have what it takes. The rest don't. But look, they have a dream, support them, be encouraging. Don't tell them that they don't have what it takes. They'll figure it out. And then when they figure it out, they will give up this dream and they'll find a dream that they have the talent for, because not everyone could be a world-class chef. Not everyone could be a professional athlete. And so we teach for that 1 or 2 that have what it takes. And for the rest, we don't tell them that they don't have what it takes. We could be wrong, but they'll figure it out. And that's a real fixed mindset way of approaching this. And one of the books that changed my life as a teacher is Mindset by Carol Dweck. I make all my students read it. It's the only thing I make them read. She talks about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is, okay, these two people who their stuff's popping off the page, why? What skills, what talent do they have that other people don't have? And the growth mindset says talent is repeatable skill sets. And maybe you're born with them, maybe you develop them through nurture and childhood, or maybe you learn them as an adult. It doesn't matter how you acquire them. It's just a skill set that's repeatable, as opposed to luck. So a repeatable skill set is, you know, you learn how to drive a car and now you can always drive a car, ride a bike. And so they have, the people that pop off the page, they have certain skill sets, certain tools that other people don't. If you can figure out what those are, compelling conflict, and then you can figure out how to teach compelling conflict, then you can teach those skill sets to other people and they can learn that talent. And so I had a writer that came to me, his name's Gary, and he had a manager and he was always taking meetings, but he could never sell anything. He could never get hired. He felt like he was that close to a career for 5 years. And then at some point you're like, okay, something's not here. Something's not working. So he came to me, deeply intuitive writer. He wrote the most amazing characters and dialogue. All I taught him on that front was don't change what you're doing. You know, like, you're amazing, just keep doing that. Don't let anyone interfere with that. But on the conceptual side, you've got some real weaknesses. And him specifically was escalations, how to keep making things get strong, like keep making things worse and worse in an organic way. That was his. So he was an easy case in that he had everything but one skill set. He was really missing one skill set. So I gave him those training exercises, and then unbeknownst to me, when I was done with that class, he spent the next 3 months doing those training exercises every day for 4 hours. I didn't know that. That's a growth mindset guy. That's a guy who's like, I want to become an expert at this skill set that I naturally am terrible at. And at the end of those 3 months, he was as good at that as a natural conceptual writer is good at that. He was just as good at that as anyone. He now has a movie that I think it's released in the fall, starring what's her name? Anyway, not Reese Witherspoon, but someone like. Anyway, he has a movie that come out. He has TMC agents. He sold 2 TV pilots, and he had everything but that one skill set. Now, at the same time, I've worked with writers who are great at escalations and great at big concepts, but their characters and dialogue, it's just like, these are puppets. And through the intuitive training, they could come out the other end where their characters and dialogue are just as good as these people who are naturally great. So the key is, you have natural talents, and then there's talents that you don't have or you're not that strong at. If you train the right way, you can, if you're willing to put the time and effort in the right way, you can end up being just as talented as someone who's naturally that way. And that's the growth mindset. So for years, I honestly, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but for years I would teach a class and I'd come home, my wife would say how it goes. I go, these 2 people I think could have careers. The rest of them, not so much. And over time, usually those 2 people would go on to have careers and none of the others. And I'm like, well, I teach for those 2 people. I encourage everyone else because you never know, but probably going to find out they don't have what it takes. When I changed this approach, and it took a long time and all effort, I remember I had a class where it was only 10 people. There was 1 person who you could tell had what it take, the other 9 no. And within 4 years, 1 of those 9 people dropped out because of long story, so that left 8. And of that 8, 6 of them went on to got careers. And I wasn't a smarter or more dynamic, or I wasn't a better teacher than prior. I just had a different teaching approach. And it was the approach that was radically different, this whole creative integration skill set thing approach. So it took me years and a lot of help from other people. I didn't just invent all this myself. But that's the really cool thing about talent, and is that it's repeatable skill sets. And you can learn these skill sets and you can develop them if you know how to train yourself and you're willing to put the time and energy into it.